They told me I was finished, that my life was over. I sat in a wheelchair, broken and invisible, but my soul refused to give up, and today I'm going to show you how I turned every limitation into my greatest strength. From the very beginning, let me say this slowly, because some truths need to be felt before they are understood. I did not wake up one day and decide to become strong. Strength was forced upon me. Courage was not a choice I made happily. It was a responsibility life placed on my shoulders when everything else was taken away. I did not become a warrior because I wanted to fight. I became a warrior because surrender would have killed my soul long before my body ever failed. There was a time when my life looked ordinary, when dreams felt simple, when tomorrow was something I assumed would arrive gently. I believed life would follow the rules we are taught as children. Study hard, love sincerely, be kind, and everything will somehow make sense. No one prepares you for the moment when life tears that script apart. No one tells you how loud silence can become when your plans collapse. No one warns you that pain can arrive without permission and change the meaning of every word you once believed in. When the accident happened, it did not just break my body. It broke my understanding of the world. In one moment, I was a woman with movement, with independence, with dreams that required walking toward them. In the next, I was learning how to breathe through pain that felt endless, how to survive days that refused to move forward. The wheelchair did not arrive quietly. It came with shock, disbelief, anger, and a grief so heavy it felt like mourning a version of myself that would never return. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how a life could change so completely while the world outside continued as if nothing had happened. The sun still rose, people still laughed, cars still passed by, and yet inside me everything had stopped. I wanted answers that did not exist. I wanted reasons that made sense. I wanted someone to tell me this was a nightmare I would wake up from. But pain does not explain itself. It simply stays. There were days when hope felt like an insult. People would say, "Be positive," as if positivity could repair broken nerves. They would say, "Everything happens for a reason," as if reasons could heal the humiliation of needing help for the simplest things. They meant well, but what they did not understand was this: when your world shrinks to hospital walls and heavy breaths, hope feels distant, almost cruel. Faith feels fragile, and strength feels like a language you no longer speak. I cried not because I was weak, but because I was human. I cried for the woman I used to be. I cried for the future I had imagined. I cried because I did not know how to exist in this new body that felt unfamiliar, uncooperative, and heavy. The wheelchair was not just a chair. It was a mirror reflecting everything I feared people would see: limitation, dependence, brokenness. I feared being pitied more than being ignored. I feared being invisible more than being judged, but somewhere in that darkness something unexpected happened. I realized that pain had not erased my voice. My body was wounded, but my soul was still awake. My legs may not have listened to me anymore, but my heart still responded when I spoke to it. My dreams were injured, not dead, and slowly, very slowly, a new question replaced my old ones. Not why me, but now that this is my reality, who will I choose to be? This question did not arrive with confidence. It arrived trembling. I did not suddenly feel brave. I did not suddenly accept everything. Acceptance is not a single moment. It is a daily negotiation with reality. Some days I accepted my situation with grace. Other days I fought it with tears, and that, too, was part of the journey. Healing does not mean smiling every day. Healing means staying even when you want to disappear. I began to understand that being strong did not mean pretending the pain wasn't there. It meant acknowledging it without letting it define me. Strength was not standing up physically. It was standing up emotionally, spiritually, mentally. It was choosing not to let bitterness move into my heart permanently. It was choosing not to hate my body for what it could no longer do, but to thank it for surviving what should have ended me. People often misunderstand warriors. They imagine warriors as loud, aggressive, fearless, but the real warriors are quiet. They cry in bathrooms. They smile for others while rebuilding themselves in private. They fall apart at night and gather themselves again in the morning. A warrior is someone who keeps going, not because it is easy, but because stopping feels worse than continuing. I had to relearn everything: how to sit, how to move, how to ask for help without feeling ashamed. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all, how to receive love without feeling like a burden. Independence had been my pride. Losing it felt like losing dignity, but dignity is not about doing everything alone. Dignity is about recognizing your worth even when you need support. It is about understanding that being helped does not make you helpless. The wheelchair taught me lessons no classroom ever could. It taught me patience because progress was slow and invisible. It taught me humility because life no longer revolved around my comfort. It taught me empathy because I now understood pain without explanation. And most importantly, it taught me that my value was not stored in my legs, but in my spirit. There were moments when society reminded me of my difference. The stares, the whispers, the awkward silence when people did not know what to say. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with discomfort. At first, those looks crushed me. I felt exposed, reduced to my disability. But with time, I realized something powerful. People will always see what they are capable of understanding. If someone sees only my wheelchair, it is because they have never learned to see souls. I stopped trying to explain myself to everyone. I stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. I realized I did not owe the world an apology for surviving. I did not owe anyone proof of my worth. My existence was not a mistake. My life was not over. It was simply different, and different does not mean less. I began to speak, first to myself, then to others. I spoke about pain without romanticizing it. I spoke about faith without pretending it was easy. I spoke about survival without wearing a mask of perfection. And in doing so, I discovered something extraordinary. When you speak your truth honestly, you give others permission to face theirs. My story was not just mine anymore. It became a bridge for others who felt broken, unseen, or forgotten. I realized that my wheelchair could either be my prison or my platform. I chose the platform, not because it was comfortable, but because silence would have slowly erased me. I chose to let my scars speak, not to seek sympathy, but to spread courage, because somewhere out there, someone was sitting in their own invisible wheelchair, paralyzed by fear, trauma, failure, or loss, believing their life was over too. And this is what I want you to hear today, wherever you are, whatever pain you carry. Your situation is not your sentence. Your injury is not your identity. Your darkest chapter is not the conclusion of your story. If your soul is still breathing, if your heart still responds to hope, then you are not finished. You may be wounded, but you are still here, and that means something. I did not rise from a wheelchair and start walking. My miracle was different. My miracle was learning how to live fully without waiting to become who I used to be. My miracle was understanding that God does not always change our circumstances, but He always offers us the strength to survive them. My miracle was discovering that purpose does not disappear when comfort does. Sometimes purpose becomes clearer only after everything familiar is taken away. This journey did not turn me into a superhero. It turned me into a believer in quiet resilience. It taught me that some victories are invisible to the world, but monumental to the soul. Getting out of bed, smiling despite pain, choosing kindness when bitterness would be easier, trusting life again after it has betrayed you. These are the real triumphs, and so I continue, not because the road is smooth, but because my soul never gave up. Even when my body felt defeated, something inside me whispered, "Stay, stay for the lessons. Stay for the people who will find hope in your survival. Stay because your story has work to do. This is not the end of my story. This is only the place where I stopped asking life to be easy and started asking myself to be brave. When I chose to stay, I did not know what staying would demand from me. Staying sounds simple, but it is one of the hardest decisions a human being can make. Staying means waking up every morning and facing the same reality without guarantees. Staying means choosing effort over escape, courage over comfort, faith over fear. Many people think giving up is dramatic, but staying is quieter and far more exhausting. Yet this is where my real transformation began. I learned very early that pain changes your relationship with time. Days feel longer, nights feel heavier, the future feels suspicious, like a promise that might betray you again. I stopped dreaming far ahead because it hurt too much to imagine things that might never happen. Instead, I learned to survive one moment at a time, one breath, 1 hour, one day. Survival became my first form of strength. There were moments when my body felt like a stranger I had to negotiate with. I would ask it to cooperate, and it would respond with silence or pain. That kind of relationship can make you angry, resentful, even cruel toward yourself. I had to unlearn self-blame. I had to stop asking my body to apologize for what happened to it. Trauma is not a failure. Injury is not a punishment. Pain is not proof that you did something wrong. Slowly, I began to understand that acceptance is not surrender. Acceptance is clarity. It is looking at reality without running away from it. It is saying, "This is where I am," without adding, "and therefore I am nothing." Acceptance gave me room to breathe again. It allowed me to stop fighting my existence and start shaping it. I discovered that strength grows in unexpected places. It grows in learning how to laugh again, not because everything is fine, but because laughter reminds you that joy still recognizes your address. It grows in forgiving people who left because they could not handle your pain. It grows in forgiving yourself for the days you felt weak, angry, or hopeless. Strength grows in honesty. Some people walked away when my life became complicated. They did not know how to stay. At first, their absence felt like another loss, but later I realized that not everyone who leaves is meant to stay. Some people are only capable of loving you when your life is easy. Their departure teaches you discernment. It teaches you the difference between support and sympathy, between presence and performance. I also learned the courage of vulnerability. Asking for help is not a sign that you have failed. It is a sign that you respect your limits. We glorify independence so much that we forget how deeply human interdependence is. I had to let people help me, even when it bruised my pride, and in doing so, I learned that love often arrives through service. Allowing others to help gave them a chance to love me in ways words never could. There were days when faith felt distant. I will not pretend otherwise. I questioned God, I argued, I cried. I asked why my prayers did not sound like answers. But faith is not the absence of doubt. Faith is choosing to trust even when understanding refuses to arrive. Faith is sitting with unanswered questions and still believing that your life has meaning. I realized that my soul was being trained, not tortured. Every hardship stripped something from me: ego, entitlement, illusion. What remained was raw, honest, unfiltered humanity, and from that place purpose began to grow. Not the kind of purpose that chases applause, but the kind that quietly serves. I noticed how people listened when I spoke honestly, not because my words were perfect, but because they were real. Pain has a strange authority. It teaches you to speak without decoration. When you have suffered deeply, you stop wasting words. You speak from the center of your truth, and people recognize that. They lean in not out of pity, but out of recognition. I stopped seeing my wheelchair as a symbol of loss and started seeing it as a witness. It witnessed my survival. It witnessed my refusal to disappear. It witnessed my evolution. I did not decorate it to hide it. I did not try to make it invisible. I allowed it to exist alongside my dignity, because dignity does not come from appearance, it comes from self-respect. I began to redefine success. Success was no longer about speed, achievement, or comparison. Success was waking up with intention. Success was choosing kindness when pain tempted me toward bitterness. Success was speaking life into myself on days when negativity tried to claim me. Success was staying soft in a world that had every excuse to harden me. People often ask me how I stayed positive. I never liked that question. Positivity suggests denial. What I practiced was hope. Hope acknowledges reality and still believes in possibility. Hope says this hurts, and also says this will not end me. Hope is not loud. It does not announce itself. It whispers, try again tomorrow. I had to grieve the life I lost before I could fully live the life I had. Grief is not weakness, it is honesty. You cannot heal what you refuse to mourn. I allowed myself to grieve without shame. I honored the woman I used to be, not because I wanted to return to her, but because she deserved to be remembered, and once I did that, I could finally welcome the woman I was becoming. That woman was not fearless, but she was grounded. She was not perfect, but she was present. She did not chase validation because she had learned how expensive it was. She understood that peace is more valuable than proving anything to anyone. I learned to measure my life not by what I lost, but by what I gained. I gained perspective. I gained compassion. I gained the ability to sit with others in their pain without trying to fix them. I gained the courage to speak when silence would have been safer. I gained a voice that came from experience, not theory, and so, day by day, without realizing it, I stopped being someone who survived tragedy and became someone who carried meaning. My story stopped being about the accident and started being about resilience, about transformation, about the quiet decision to keep choosing life even when life had not been gentle with me. If you are listening to this and you feel tired, unseen, or defeated, let me tell you something from the deepest place in my heart. Exhaustion does not mean you are losing. Sometimes it means you have been strong for too long without rest. Pause if you must, cry if you need to, but do not convince yourself that your struggle is pointless. Pain that is endured with awareness always leaves wisdom behind. You do not need to become extraordinary overnight. You only need to stay curious, stay open, stay kind to yourself. The rest will unfold in ways you cannot imagine yet. I did not become a warrior by fighting the world. I became a warrior by refusing to abandon myself. There is a moment in every long battle when exhaustion stops being physical and becomes spiritual. That was the phase I entered next. My body had adjusted to pain, but my soul was tired of explaining itself to the world. Tired of being strong in public and fragile in private. Tired of hearing inspiring words that did not understand the cost of surviving. This was the stage where resilience had to deepen, or I would slowly disappear behind a polite smile. I realized that healing is not a straight line. It loops back. It revisits old wounds. Some mornings I woke up feeling peaceful, grounded, almost grateful. Other mornings I woke up angry at the universe for moving on without me. And both versions of me were honest. Healing does not erase contradiction. It teaches you to hold it without breaking. One of the hardest lessons I learned was how to sit with my own thoughts. When the world becomes quieter, your mind becomes louder. Doubts crept in at night. Questions about worth, desirability, relevance. Society teaches us to associate value with productivity, beauty with perfection, strength with independence. Suddenly, I felt like I existed outside those definitions. I had to redefine myself from the inside out. I stopped asking, what can I do? And started asking, who can I be? I discovered that character does not require mobility. Integrity does not depend on physical ability. Wisdom is not stored in muscles. My voice, my compassion, my insight, these were untouched. And when I focused on cultivating what remained instead of mourning what was gone, something inside me stabilized. I also faced anger I did not know how to express. Anger at the accident, anger at the unfairness, anger at the expectations placed on me to be inspirational all the time. People love survival stories, but they rarely want to see the mess behind them. They want strength without tears, faith without doubt, courage without fear. I had to give myself permission to be whole, not heroic. I learned that boundaries are a form of self-respect. I did not owe everyone access to my pain. I did not need to perform resilience for applause. Some parts of my journey were sacred and private. Protecting my energy became essential. Not everyone deserved my explanations, and not every question required an answer. As I grew more honest with myself, I noticed something shift. My silence became intentional. My words became measured. I no longer spoke to convince. I spoke to connect, and when I did, the connections were deeper, more authentic. People did not just hear my story. They felt seen in it. I realized that influence does not come from perfection. It comes from presence. When you show up as you are without pretending, you give others permission to remove their masks. My vulnerability did not make me weak. It made my message trustworthy. Pain had refined my voice, not silenced it. There was also a quiet revolution happening inside me regarding self-love. Before the accident, self-love felt conditional. Love yourself if you achieve. Love yourself if you look a certain way. Love yourself if you meet expectations. After everything was stripped away, I learned unconditional self-acceptance. I learned to treat myself with the same gentleness I offered others. To speak to myself with patience instead of punishment. I stopped waiting for confidence to arrive before I lived my life. Confidence is not a prerequisite for action. It is a result of showing up despite fear. I acted while uncertain. I spoke while trembling. I moved forward without guarantees, and with each small step, confidence quietly followed. I also learned the power of stillness. When your pace is forced to slow down, you begin to notice things you once ignored: the tone of your own thoughts, the weight of words, the presence of gratitude in unexpected places. Stillness taught me that life is not a race to be won, but an experience to be honored. Gratitude entered my life differently than before. It was no longer about being thankful for abundance. It was about acknowledging survival. Gratitude for mornings when pain was manageable. Gratitude for people who stayed without being asked. Gratitude for moments of laughter that arrived without effort. Gratitude did not deny my suffering, it coexisted with it. I also confronted my fear of being forgotten. When your life pauses while the world accelerates, invisibility becomes a real fear. But I learned that relevance is not about constant visibility. It is about meaningful presence. You do not need to be everywhere to matter. You need to be real where you are. As my inner world strengthened, my relationship with the wheelchair changed again. It no longer represented limitation. It represented adaptation. Human beings are not defined by how they fall, but by how they adjust. Adaptation is intelligence in motion, and I was adapting every day. I began to see myself not as someone life happened to, but as someone who was actively responding. Response is power. You may not control the storm, but you always control your response to it. And in that response, your character is revealed. I realized that the soul does not need legs to move forward. It moves through intention, through courage, through truth. My soul had traveled farther in stillness than it ever had while walking, and that realization freed me from the illusion that movement equals progress. If you are in a place where your life feels paused, where circumstances have slowed you down or forced you to stop, listen to me carefully. Stillness is not stagnation. Silence is not emptiness. Pause is not failure. Sometimes life slows you down because it is teaching you something you could never learn at full speed. Do not rush your healing to meet someone else's timeline. Do not compare your journey to those who have not walked your path. Your growth is happening, even if it is invisible right now. Roots grow in darkness before anything appears above the surface. I did not become stronger by denying my pain. I became stronger by understanding it, respecting it, and carrying it with dignity. My soul did not give up because I stopped demanding that life be easy and started trusting that I could survive what came, and that trust, quiet, steady, unshakable, became the foundation of the warrior I was becoming. At this stage of my journey, something subtle but powerful began to change. I was no longer only surviving my pain, I was listening to it. Pain has a voice, and when you stop running from it, it starts teaching you. It taught me what truly matters and what never did. It stripped away illusions I once protected fiercely. It showed me how much energy I had wasted trying to please people who were never meant to understand me. I began to notice how much of my earlier life had been shaped by expectations. Expectations of how a woman should look, how she should move, how she should succeed, how she should endure quietly. Losing my physical independence forced me to question those expectations, and once questioned, many of them lost their power over me. I realized that I had spent years trying to earn worth that was already mine. My accident did not take my value away, it exposed how fragile my definition of value had been. I learned that worth is not proven by performance. It is inherent. It exists even when you are exhausted, even when you are broken, even when you are still figuring things out. There were moments when loneliness visited me unannounced, not the kind of loneliness that comes from being alone, but the kind that comes from feeling misunderstood. People saw my strength and assumed I no longer needed support. They admired the warrior and forgot the woman. That was another lesson I had to accept. When people see your strength, they often forget your softness. And so I learned to protect my softness intentionally. Softness is not weakness. Softness is sensitivity, empathy, compassion. It is the ability to remain human in a world that rewards hardness. My pain had given me depth, and I refused to trade that depth for approval. I allowed myself to feel deeply, to care deeply, to love deeply, even if it meant risking disappointment. As my inner world matured, I noticed that my fears no longer controlled my decisions. They still existed, but they no longer ruled me. Fear lost its authority the moment I stopped believing it had something new to tell me. Fear repeats old stories, courage writes new ones. I chose to listen to courage even when its voice shook. I also learned the discipline of hope. Hope is not a feeling that appears automatically. It is a practice. Some days hope looked like prayer. Other days it looked like rest. Sometimes it looked like doing nothing at all and trusting that stillness was enough for that moment. Hope does not demand constant motion. It asks for consistent belief. I stopped measuring my life against what it could have been. Comparison is a quiet thief. It steals joy without making noise. Once I let go of that habit, peace entered my life differently. Peace was no longer the absence of pain, it was the absence of resistance. I stopped fighting the truth of my circumstances and started cooperating with them. There was also a deep shift in how I understood beauty. Before, beauty had been external, temporary, fragile. Now, beauty became something unshakable. Beauty was resilience. Beauty was authenticity. Beauty was the courage to exist honestly in a world that prefers polished illusions. I stopped trying to look like strength and started living it. My voice grew steadier, my presence grew calmer. I no longer needed to prove how far I had come. I was comfortable being seen and comfortable being unseen. Both states held dignity. That balance was freedom. I noticed how my story began to reach people in quiet ways, not always through applause or recognition, but through messages whispered in confidence. People told me they felt less alone, that my words gave them permission to breathe, that my survival reminded them of their own unfinished strength. That is when I understood something profound. Purpose is not loud. It moves gently, heart to heart. I had not been spared pain, but I had been trusted with it, and trust is not given lightly. I carried my story carefully, knowing it could either become a weapon of bitterness or a tool of healing. I chose healing every time. I began to understand that warriors are not defined by how many battles they win, but by how they carry the ones they do not. Some wounds never close completely. Some losses never make sense. But dignity remains possible. Meaning remains possible. Love remains possible. If you are listening and you feel like your life has taken something from you that cannot be replaced, hear this. Replacement is not always the goal. Transformation is. You may never return to who you were, but you can become someone deeper, wiser, more compassionate than you ever imagined. I did not rebuild my life to look the same. I rebuilt it to feel true. And in that truth I found a strength that no accident could take away. My soul had stopped asking life for permission. It had learned how to stand even without standing. By this point in my journey, I understood something that changed the way I lived every single day. Survival is not the destination, it is the doorway. Many people survive pain, but very few allow it to reshape them into something wiser instead of something bitter. I stood at that choice every day. Some mornings, bitterness knocked loudly. Other mornings, grace arrived quietly. What mattered was not which one appeared first, but which one I invited in. I began to notice how much power there is in choosing your inner climate. You cannot control the weather outside, but you can decide what grows inside you. I could not control my body's limitations, but I could control the language I used toward myself. I stopped calling myself unlucky. I stopped calling my life ruined. Words are not harmless. They build the houses we live in mentally. I chose words that gave me room to breathe. I also made peace with the fact that my life would never look normal again, and strangely, that was liberating. Normal is overrated. Normal keeps people quiet, compliant, afraid to question the life they were handed. My life demanded honesty. It demanded courage. It demanded that I stop pretending and start living deliberately. I learned to celebrate progress that no one applauded. The days I chose patience instead of frustration. The days I forgave instead of resented. The days I trusted instead of panicked. These victories did not trend, but they transformed me. Real growth rarely announces itself. There were setbacks, of course. Days when pain returned with old intensity. Days when fatigue made me question how long I could keep being strong. But strength does not mean never feeling tired. It means refusing to let tiredness make your decisions. I learned to rest without guilt. Rest is not quitting. Rest is maintenance. I stopped seeing rest as weakness and started seeing it as wisdom. My body was asking for care, not criticism. My soul was asking for patience, not pressure. When I listened, I healed deeper. When I ignored those signals, I suffered longer. Respecting yourself is one of the most radical forms of strength. I also learned something crucial about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not about excusing what happened. It is about freeing yourself from carrying the weight of it forever. Holding on to anger did not punish the past. It poisoned my present. Forgiveness was not a gift I gave others. It was a gift I gave myself so I could move forward lighter. As my heart softened, my faith deepened. Faith stopped being a demand for miracles and became a relationship built on trust. I no longer asked God to fix everything. I asked for the strength to face everything, and that strength arrived in unexpected forms. Calmness during chaos, clarity during confusion, peace during uncertainty. I understood then that miracles are not always about changing circumstances. Sometimes the miracle is endurance. Sometimes it is clarity. Sometimes it is discovering that you are still capable of love after life has tested you so harshly. Those are quiet miracles, but they are powerful. My relationship with the world also changed. I no longer chased validation. I no longer explained my pain to those who wanted inspiration but not truth. I showed up honestly or not at all. Authenticity became my anchor. It saved me from exhaustion and disappointment. I realized that my story did not belong to the accident. It belonged to my response. The accident was a moment. My response was a lifetime, and every day I chose to respond with dignity, intention, and hope, even when hope felt thin. If you are in a season where your strength feels depleted, let me remind you, you are not required to be strong all the time. You are required to be honest, honest with yourself about what hurts, honest about what you need, honest about what you can and cannot carry today. Honesty is the foundation of real healing. You do not become a warrior by winning every battle. You become a warrior by refusing to abandon yourself when the battle lasts longer than expected. You stay, you adapt. You soften where you once hardened. You grow where you once feared. I was no longer waiting for life to return to what it was. I was building something new with what remained, and what remained was enough. More than enough. My soul did not give up because it learned something vital. I was never meant to be defined by what I lost. I was meant to be revealed by how I lived afterward. And now, standing here in the fullness of what I have learned, I want to leave you with the heart of my journey. Being a warrior is not about the battles that the world sees. It is about the battles no one witnesses, the silent negotiations with fear, the quiet endurance of pain, the daily choice to keep showing up when the easiest option is to disappear. That is where real courage lies. That is where the soul is tested and revealed. I did not become a warrior because I was fearless. I became a warrior because I refused to surrender my spirit, even when my body reminded me daily of its limitations. I refused to allow a moment, a circumstance, or someone else's expectations to dictate the value of my existence. I chose to live fully, with intention, with honesty, with love, and with resilience. That choice, repeated endlessly, became my power. I want you to hear this clearly. Your pain is not your identity. Your setbacks do not define your story. The losses, the accidents, the things you never asked for, they are chapters, not the conclusion. What defines you is how you respond, how you carry yourself when the world whispers that you should quit, how you continue to move even when every step is heavy, how you choose to hope when despair seems louder than light. That is the measure of a warrior. My wheelchair did not limit my life, it revealed it. It revealed my strength, my patience, my empathy, my determination, and my capacity to inspire. It revealed the depth of my soul and the expansiveness of human possibility. Every struggle I endured, every tear I shed, every day I woke up and said, I will keep going. All of it was shaping me into someone who could live and love without apology. I want every person listening to know that the greatest victories are often invisible. The day you stop blaming yourself for what you cannot change, the day you stop waiting for permission to heal, the day you embrace your story fully, with every scar, every weakness, every triumph, those are the days your life transforms. Those are the days you move from being merely alive to being fully alive. My message to you is simple but profound. Your soul is unbreakable, even when your body fails, even when your circumstances are harsh. Even when the world doubts you, you are capable of more than you imagine, of rising higher than you thought possible. You are capable of courage, of grace, of hope. You are capable of becoming the warrior your story demands. So, wherever you are today, however heavy your heart feels, remember this: do not give up on yourself. Do not surrender to fear, to doubt, to pain. Your life is not over. Your story is not finished. Rise. Speak, love, heal, and above all, let your soul never give up, because the world needs your light, your courage, your presence. From the wheelchair to the warrior, this is my truth. Life may challenge you, it may bend you, it may try to break you, but your soul has the power to endure, to shine, to rise. Keep moving, keep believing, keep surviving, and most importantly, keep living fully. Your journey is sacred, your strength is real, your soul never gives up, and neither should you.